Carol Ross, Warren Caudle, and Stafford Barnett. Look, we had to do a little bit of rearranging just to fit all the opinions in, right? And get them where they would all fit together. But, Bernie, I feel like it kind of feels like when someone gets too close to you at the checkout at the grocery store, and you're like, just let me put my stuff on the belt, because I'm all up on your side now.
You're hilarious.
I'm liking this, though.
It's kind
of relaxing for me. I don't have any buttons to press or anything.
We could trade.
Nah, I'm good.
Trade, because according to you,
over here with the monitor.
Oh, no.
Warren, there's a filter. There's parental controls on that computer over there, Warren. So, all right, lots to talk about today. Of course, as we watch what's happening with Irma, we have a bunch of preparedness going on. But I want to start with North Korea, as we have another test happening, and the military experts saying we almost don't even see the movement around, because what they're thinking is that a lot of the movement is happening really far underground. But it all comes down to Kim Jong-un and what's happening there. Obviously, the countries in the region a bit concerned as well. Carol, we'll start with you. We've had this conversation before and asked this question, what do we do? But it's kind of like, what are the rest of the people in the region going to do? Putin wants to talk more. He says that the sanctions aren't working, but we should talk more. What are your thoughts?
Well, China has been the linchpin all along, haven't they? And they haven't been willing to rein in the little dictator simply because it plays in their interests to keep everything in that area, especially destabilized. Their whole goal has always been, at first Pacific Rim hegemony and now world hegemony. So to keep us off base and to keep things roiled up, they will not step up. However, it is beginning to blow back on them, I think, politically around the world, when you see that the Security Council, first time unanimous against North Korea's actions. So I think if Xi Jinping really wants to, if Chairman Li of China really wants to have that leadership role on the world stage, he's going to have to do something about his client state. Otherwise, there aren't very many viable options militarily, because we have dithered over the past 30 years or more. And especially if you go back and see those Bill Clinton clips that are just, just ironic and really disturbing. We've got it solved now. We sent him billions of dollars, and now he's going to back down his father. This was his father at the time. And, of course, it's never happened. The grandfather, the father, and Youngin, they've never backed off because they've never had to. They've never felt that there was a president of the United States that would follow through on any military threats, because it is a really thorny situation. Even the South Koreans are, they're very worried above all, because just the conventional weapons could wipe them out. So it's a really and truly, this is one of those, a lot of people call no-win situations. This might be the absolute no-win situation. But I don't know, this time I'm not sure about this president.
I'll tell you this, Carol, I know you just said a lot of really smart things, but I was completely lost when you called him a little dictator. It's great. It's my favorite part of the whole thing. Stafford, what are your thoughts on North Korea?
So there's a former CIA agent, Mike Baker, who's been pretty public about this on a couple of different forums, and he's basically said we have three options. First option, assassinate Kim Jong-un, right? And that option is bad because we don't know what is in place in case that happens. There's probably a plan that says, hey, if I'm dead, launch whatever, right? Second option is first strike, right? Where we go and we try to take out the conventional weapons along the border. There's enough artillery along the border to level Seoul in, I think, an hour.
And it's close, right?
Yeah, it's right there. So these guys, they've got grid patterns set up, and they can just wipe out Seoul, which is the largest city in South Korea, instantly, right? And the third option is to accept that North Korea is a nuclear power. And I think that that's where we're at, unfortunately. And, we're going to test sanctions to see if sanctions work. And so far they haven't, because they still have trade with Russia and China. I think it's ironic. We kind of see Russia and China doing the same thing America does with immigrants, right? They have a massive logging industry in Russia. Majority of the people working in the logging industry are North Koreans.
Really?
Yeah. Vice did a special on this a while back where they took trains into Russia. And it was like 4 days of riding a train to get to the logging industry where the North Koreans are working. And it's North Koreans walking around cutting down trees and with minders, right? They've got people there watching them. So until, Russia and China step up to the table and say, hey, we can't do this anymore. We can't allow you to continue to be aggressive because it's gonna cost us. And the reality is Russia and China are in cahoots together, right? It's in their best interest to see America weak. And, I think with our current administration and his ability to respond to this stuff, our position is getting weaker.
Warren, there was a list that came out of all the countries that still do trade with North Korea. Where does, as Carol and Stafford have said, where does this kind of fall for you?
Well, I don't care who does trade with North Korea. Whatever it is, it's very little. I mean, they're the poorest country in the world, basically. The only thing they do have is a nuclear program, and they do have a lot of military. There was a classic line from a movie, one of the spaghetti westerns from Clint Eastwood called The Good, Bad, and the Ugly. It was a classic line where the guy comes in and threatens to shoot a man. The guy shoots him, and he says, when it's time to shoot, shoot. Don't talk. And it will come down to that where we'll just have to kill him. And that what I think the real dilemma we're in right now is our relationship with Russia is very poisoned, and it's poisoned because of the perception that the media has thrown out there, and the socialists, the new Nazis in this country, Democratic Party, has put out there. They hate Putin because he has turned from the Soviet Union being a socialist country to basically a free market capitalist country, and they cannot stand that. That was their one big beacon of hope back in the Cold War days. China, we've come a long way with China. The last thing China needs to see is the United States start to melt down in any kind of a way, because we are their best interest. Because as long as we've got our economy going and we've got their whole country basically depends on trade with us. And there's a lot of animosity and hard feeling between all those countries over in the Pacific Rim with China. And, I can understand why these countries want nuclear weapons, because it does make you a part of the club. It gives you a seat at the table. If a country has nuclear weapons, then you have to deal with them. But this is the first time we have had a country that wanted nuclear weapons who's out there threatening to use them.
Most at least lie. Say we want power.
Yeah, the rest of them, that none of them ever said, as soon as we get this bomb, we're going to launch it on you. So at some point what we should do is send some good envoy over there to, and not the CIA, because they've screwed up everything they've done for the last 55, 60 years, over to Russia and to China and say, look, we got to kill a guy. You want to do it? You want us to do it? How are we going to do it? We need to get together and get this done.
Carol, start first, and then we'll wrap up with Stafford.
What I'd like to know is that recent defector who actually did get out with his family, because normally they keep the family in there, and somehow he got out. He convinced them to let his family come out for a family vacation or something. I don't know. He got out, and I wonder what kind of debriefing they did with him, what kind of information he gave them. He was very high up in the government, so hopefully he gave them some actionable information that will help the Trump administration make a decision, an informed decision on what to do.
So nuclear weapons are a nation's insurance policy to say, I will never get invaded, right? It's the reason that we worry about Pakistan and India. It's the reason that we worry about Iran, right? As long as Iran doesn't have nuclear weapons, we still have the ability to go in and invade them. And the reason, Warren, you said some things about the Russians that Democrats and press and all this kind of stuff that I just don't agree with. First, the Russians invaded the Ukraine.
No, they did not.
Yeah, yes, they did. They needed a route to water, right? Because they're a landlocked nation, and that's how they did it. They invaded Ukraine. Second of all, they've been supplying arms.
Took over Crimea.
They've been supplying arms to the people that we've been fighting in Afghanistan and Iraq for years, right? And so, Russia is, look, I got to say, they're playing this game probably smarter than anybody right now. They've come out, and instead of trying to shoot down the things that are being said about the election in Russia and everything else, every time it seems like it's going away, they just throw out more evidence that they did, that whether it's real or not, that there was some collusion, right? They provided the stuff with the attorneys meeting, the list of people who were at the meeting with Eric. Was it Eric Trump or was it Don Jr.?
Stafford, when you don't have to worry about the rule of law or a mainstream or a media that's after your butt all the time, you can get away with a lot.
Well, but that says a lot about a society when you don't have to worry about the rule of law.
Let's go back to one point right quick. You're talking about them invading Ukraine. The Crimean Peninsula was a Russian province or whatever up until the Soviet Union.
And then it was a sovereign state.
Do what?
And then it was a sovereign state after that.
When?
After the fall of the USSR.
No, it wasn't. It was never a sovereign state. It was actually a part of Ukraine. But if you go there, and I've been there like 4 times, 95% of the people there will tell you, I'm Russian.
They're Russian, yeah.
They speak Russian. Every sign is in Russian. And they had the Russian nuclear warm water Navy works out of there. They got one of the naval academies are there. That place was a Russian province. And they turned around and they let the people vote. The people voted, which is what we have said over and over and over. Let the people vote. Let democratic action take place. So what happened? The people got to vote. And what was the vote?
Stay with Russia.
It was something like 94% voted to become part of Russia. And it was like 6% said no. And now we say, well, that's wrong. That's wrong. Why is it wrong?
Why'd they have to do it with tanks?
They didn't do it with tanks.
If it was democratic.
You're mixing up 2 different things. They did not do Crimea with any tanks. But now on the eastern part of Ukraine, they already had a lot of military there. They had military bases in Crimea. But on the eastern part of Ukraine, same thing. They are Russian. They speak Russian. They will tell you they're Russian. That's where they have these big conflicts on every election, presidential election. You got the pro-Russians, and then you got the anti-Russian group. What they probably should do is just have another referendum and say, you want to be Russian or you want to be Ukraine.
But they do have troops along the border there.
Oh, they do. They got troops in there. But but it's been an ongoing thing for decades.
So was Trump wrong when he said that Russia shouldn't have invaded Crimea?
Probably.
Okay. So the Democrats and Trump actually agree on something, that Russia shouldn't have invaded Crimea.
I'm sure there's a lot of things that we agree on, the Democrats and Trump.
Let's move on to DACA. Big news yesterday. It seemed like it was going to be a landmark decision, but now it sort of seems like maybe it wasn't such a big deal because now Congress is going to try their hand at it. We'll get to that next on Wingin' It Wednesday on Acadiana's Morning News. 7:26 now on Acadiana's Morning News. Wingin' It Wednesday brought to you each and every Wednesday by Service Cadillac over at 1212 and 1214 Ambassador Caffrey. It is Wash It Up Wednesday. Go get your car washed. I mean, why have a nice car if you're going to drive around with dust and love bugs and mosquitoes all over it?
That's a great point.
That's what I think. Or if you're like me, when you need to wash your car, why not just get a new one? You know? Just get a whole new one. It's already washed for you. Works for me. Make it a Cadillac, by the way. 1212 and 1214 Ambassador Caffrey at Service Cadillac, bringing you Wingin' It Wednesday each and every day. So it almost seems like there was a little bit more build-up than what actually happened yesterday with the DACA announcement. Despite the fact that there were protests in a lot of the major cities, it looks like it's going to be up to Congress. We'll start with you, Stafford, on this one. What does it mean for the so-called dreamers, and is it even appropriate for them to be panicking now?
Well, let's clarify. It's up to Congress, maybe. So, Jeff Sessions carried, Trump's water and went out and made the announcement. And we're dealing with a president that really wants to be loved, saw the reaction of everybody, and then tweeted last night that said, hey, if Congress can't get it done, I may consider reinstating DACA, right? So, it's tough to negotiate when you give away your negotiation position like that. So, we're talking about 800,000 people who didn't make a conscious decision to come to this country, but who are here now and are paying taxes. They're not criminals. The majority of them are educated without access because of their status to any funding for college, right? So they didn't go out. They weren't given any scholarships. They had to pay for everything themselves or their parents. Personally, look, are they in an odd position because they are here, quote unquote, illegally? Yes. Are they productive members of society and people that we want to keep around? I think so. So I think it's a weird position to be in. To expect Congress to be able to get anything accomplished in this next session, when they're looking at comprehensive tax reform, they're looking at now, they're looking at immigration now and a lot of other things. I just don't see it happening. They can't agree on what color the sky is. So that's my. I know I probably need to talk about it a little bit more, but I really think that's my extent of it.
Okay, so Warren, this morning, Lindsey Graham did an interview where he was asked what are the top 3 things that you're worried about, and it was Harvey relief, health care fixes, and tax reform. It doesn't even seem like this DACA thing is even in the top 3. Do you think anything will actually get solved in the 6 months allotted? Because 6 months is not a long time when you talk about the snail's pace that the Senate moves.
Look, and I hear that all the time. Mitch McConnell likes to say that, well, it takes a long time to do things. I was in a meeting one time with the vice president of Schlumberger was there, and he was talking about that it took us 8 years to get a tool from the conception stage to design, to building, to implementation, to get it into the market. He said, does anybody in here realize that we fought all of World War II in 4.5 years? You can do anything when you set your mind to it. And, this is the deal with Congress, is that nothing is important to them. The only thing important to them is getting reelected. And if you say, you have a job to do, well, so what? And that's what's happened with this thing. It's their job. They should have already been doing it. But as far as these people, who are they? Some of them came here, with their parents or whatever. I knew a girl that's exactly what happened to her. She was born in Venezuela. Her mother married a guy, came up here, and then they divorced, but she never did register the daughter. Never even had a green card or nothing. She graduated from high school and graduated from college, and then she went to get a passport, and they said, you're not even a U.S. citizen. And she wound up getting her citizenship and what have you. But anyway, what about all the kids that came across a couple of years ago or whatever from Honduras, Costa Rica, whatever, that was sent in here by the thousands, that today they're not going to college, they're not working, they're what? They must be 11, 12, 13 years old or whatever now. I thought that was a lot of what this group is about. All of these things can be handled. Congress needs to just set some guidelines, set some rules. I've always said I'm for guest worker programs and those kind of visas and all of that stuff, and I'm also for people becoming citizens, but do it by the rules. And I don't think the rules are fair the way it is now, where you got to wait 13 years to get in, and other people get a free ride. It's, all they got to do is raise their hand. And so anyway, it is up to Congress. I think this is a good move on the president's part. Throw it back in Congress's laps and say, okay, you've been talking about this all this time, now do something. Your job.
So, Carol, what do you make of it and kind of how it happened yesterday?
Oh, it's a brilliant move by Trump, really and truly. Just keep them destabilized as long as you can and try to get something done while they're looking the other way. The fact is the studies by the National Academy of Sciences prove that on the whole, on balance, immigrants cost us more money, most of them that come in, and especially the illegal and what Trump cited was mostly criminals that they want out of here, gang members, etc. That's where he wants to target this. But on balance, we are paying more than we are getting in taxes per immigrant, and that's from the National Academy of Sciences research. About $74,000 it's costing us per immigrant, and if you add in the dreamers, the way the kids brought in, it pushes it up to about 90-some thousand, because they're getting a lot of benefits, and their parents haven't been here that long, or they haven't been here that long, and they're getting a lot of benefits. They are paying some taxes. There's no question about that. But on balance, I think it's costing this country money, and it's costing jobs. And who are the lowest ones on the totem pole? Blacks and Hispanics that are here legally. And they're getting hurt more than any other group by the illegal immigration. So the president was right. Even the former president, the great and wonderful Barack, the legislative branch, quote, the legislative branch, not the executive branch, writes these laws. This is the bedrock of our constitutional system, which I took a solemn oath to preserve, protect, and defend. And there can be no path to principled immigration reform if the executive branch is able to rewrite or nullify federal law at will, which he went ahead and did anyway, being a complete scofflaw in terms of the Constitution. He never respected our Constitution. And so doing this, feeling that he has really To be honest with you, he's left a lot of terrible things in his wake. That someone is going to have to come in, and that's Trump coming in to clean up. And that's exactly why people voted for Trump. If they had wanted a continuation of Barack Obama, they would have voted for Hillary Clinton, and they didn't.
What did
They want these things cleaned out, and what immigration reform is one of them. Now, having Jeff Sessions, the criticism of having Jeff Sessions announce it is a legal issue. It is a legal constitutional issue. It should come from Congress, and the announcement rightly came from the Justice Department. This was a total abdication of our laws in that executive action. So this is the right way to go. Have Congress do it. And the best part is Congress's ratings are even lower than Trump's. So hey, what could possibly blow back on Trump with this?
What do you make?
By the way, they have until March 5th.
Yeah. What do you make of that tweet? Year. Congress has 6 months to legalize DACA. Something the Obama administration was unable to do. If they can't, I will revisit the issue. Well,
he may revisit the issue, but isn't that a way to keep them all off balance? I mean, they have until March 5th to come up with something. And if they can't do that, then, of course, what Sarah Sanders said yesterday, and I think that is kind of the shot across the bow right now, because he really wants to revisit Obamacare. He wants tax reform, especially above all now. They'll put Obamacare on the back burner for now, but they really want that tax reform because he really feels, being a business person who's had to deal under this unfair tax system, he really feels that is critical. So I think he's really focusing on that right now. But if he can use this as a negotiating point, and when Sarah Sanders said in that press conference several times, so I know they focus grouped it, they tested it, they believe it, if you can't solve this, then get out of the way and let somebody who can do it. That's leading up to the 2018 elections. That's a shot across the bow right there.
Yeah, so I think that what you said is indicative of what a lot of us have a problem with. Okay, and I'm not saying us from left side or any side, but from kind of the middle, right? So trying to get Congress or Senate or Congress and the House off balance is one of those things that just blows me away, because at the end of the day, it's Congress and the Senate's jobs to propose bills to get it to the president to either sign it or veto it. They have the power to write laws. Now let's go back and talk about these DACA kids, right? Because you said a couple things there that we agree with. Okay, so nobody wants the criminals, right? Barack Obama didn't want the criminals. None of us wanted the criminals. Okay, so DACA is not about criminals. It's 800,000 kids.
He never articulated that.
It's 800,000 kids who came here because their parents made a decision to come here. And yes, the costs on them are going to be higher because they came as kids and they got public education. What's going to happen is if they stay here, that money will be repaid back.
Got public assistance.
Will be repaid back to society, just as the cost of my kids, your kids, or anybody else's kids cost money.
Stafford. That is speculative. You have no idea if it's going to be paid back.
Well, let's talk about the rules, though, right? These kids are going to get sent back to their country. You know how long it is before they can apply for citizenship? A decade. 10 years.
Nobody is going to send those kids back, and you know it, but the problem has to be fixed. The underlying problem needs to be fixed, and nobody has been willing to really be the catalyst. It needed a catalyst to get it off dead center, and that's what DACA, this is. This is trying to get Congress to act and trying to get people off dead center because they've been dithering about immigration reform for as long as I can remember.
So you truly believe that in 6 months, Congress can tackle the debt ceiling, FEMA costs for Harvey and now for Irma.
Absolutely.
Tax relief.
If they were willing.
And immigration.
And by the way, let us remember, when is March? March is, a lot of states are holding what? Primaries for the 2018 elections. This is going to jam them. Do you want a conservative? Because Mitch McConnell will be out there funding every liberal Republican he can find. And this is going to be, I think, a defining issue, and it is for the base of the Republican Party.
Only time will tell.
Let's wrap this one up. We will go to the phones. Let's take a phone call, 232-1542. Good morning. You're on Wingin' It Wednesday. To wrap up this topic, go ahead with your comment.
Yes, my name is Kim DeValcourt. I live in Kaplan. I understand everything about DACA, and I understand what they're all saying. But here's the bottom line, guys, and I call Carol Short a lot. And I got a lot of respect for her and for the other guy in there that's talking for DACA. But what I don't hear is we always talk about the illegals. I want to hear somebody talk about me and my kids.
Mm-hmm.
I want to hear that my kids didn't go to college because I didn't have enough money. I didn't get a free ride. None of my kids or grandkids are getting a free ride. Why is it that I have to pay, my tax dollars have to pay for children who were brought here on trains? And I remember seeing that on TV. That guy can say what he wants. I remember seeing these people come by to train loads for months. Nobody, during that whole time, nobody said, well, hang on, guys. We got American citizens that are sleeping in the streets. We have veterans who are sleeping in the streets. Nobody talked about that at that time. But now it's all about DACA. And I can understand nobody wants to send the little kids home. I understand all that. And there has to be a fix for this. But instead of always talking about the illegals, how about let's fix some of the stuff we got wrong with this country that American citizens are suffering with. And that is, the guy that was talking with Carol, I forget his name.
Stafford.
Yeah.
Forgive me, but yeah, I understand where you're coming from. I really do. And I feel for these children. But you know who I also feel for? My grandbabies. So, what are my grandbabies' lives going to be like in this country? And it's coming to a point where I have to start worrying about all this because it's never been like this before.
Never.
So when are we going to stop talking about the illegal people here in this country and start talking about the American citizens who are suffering? How about our veterans, y'all? We have so many veterans dying every day and sleeping on the street. And I know we talk about it a lot. I understand. On Carol's show, she talks about the veterans all the time. On Russia's show, they talk about the veterans. But you know what I never hear from? Congress. The congressmen and all these people, they always talk, but they don't act. And the American people are sick of it. They're sick of these people talking and not acting. And that's all I got to say. Y'all have a great day.
Don't mistake my position on DACA as antipathy to the situation with veterans and everybody else. We're talking about 800,000 kids in a population of 330 million. I agree 100% the veterans and the homeless need to be taken care of, and we need to find ways to work with it. But I think that it's misguided to say that I'm off because I'm not talking about veterans. So I feel you. I think you're right. And if you ever want to discuss veterans, let's just bring it up on a Wingin' It Wednesday, and we'll have that discussion. In the meantime, I'm going to stay focused on the subject at hand.
Let's get a quick break in. Right now, it's 7:44 on Wingin' It Wednesday. We're going to come back to continue this conversation and maybe take some more of your calls. Next on Wingin' It Wednesday, stay with us. 7:51. Welcome back to Wingin' It Wednesday as we wrap up the video that's kind of gone viral. Not kind of. It's gone viral of a nurse in Utah and kind of a back and forth with police officers. I think the most interesting part is that the video is actually the body cam video from one of the officers that was there. We know the main one that ended up putting her handcuffs into a cop car has now been fired from his side job as a medic, and kind of led to a lot of questions about hospital policy regarding taking blood from someone involved in an accident. Warren, did you see this?
I actually did see that, and I was shocked, to say the least. You know, that this thing kind of boils down to what's policy and what's law. I heard somebody yesterday say, well, they think that the guy's lieutenant is the one who told him to arrest the woman or whatever, so it said, so the lieutenant is the one who is at fault. And I'm saying, you know, wrong. You know, ignorance of the law is no excuse. It's just like in the military. You know, if a 4-star general comes up and tells you to do something, you're a private. If he gives you an order, and that order is unlawful, then it's on you if you carry it out. Because you're not to obey an unlawful order. You know, my superior told me to. That was the term that was used in the Nuremberg trials after World War II. You know, we were just following orders. That's no excuse. Put the rope around his neck, drop the door. And, you know, that this thing was it was just so bad from all the way around. And the girl sitting there, the nurse was standing there reading off the 3 things that you're supposed to be. You know, he's unconscious, he's, whatever, you know, the other 2 were, and not under arrest, and something. And so, you know, I just didn't quite understand the whole thing. And I just thought that he was so out of line. And I know that one doctor told me one time that was working in the emergency room, and they brought somebody in there who was involved in a crash like that, and said his lawyer shows up at the emergency room. and said, you draw any blood out of him that is used for anything criminally or against him, that you will be sued for the rest of your life and you will never practice medicine in this town, blah, blah, blah. And then I think that the court in Louisiana has since changed that there are certain circumstances that, that they are permitted to draw it. And I don't know what the laws are in Utah. All I got to say is the way that thing was done was just so over the top.
Carol, I talked to someone who actually works in one of the emergency rooms here, and they have a very similar policy. It's less law, but more that the hospital thinks they have to protect the patient. Even if you are a suspect, you have to be under arrest or there has to be a warrant because it's your property.
Well, they do. Imagine their liability in this case. If you watch the entire video, it's even worse because she says over and over again. And then at one point I heard her say something about, we have an agreement with y'all. With you. And she goes, and she has that paper and she said, look, I can't do it, blah, blah, blah. She said, my duty, and I saw a video of her later on saying that it's her duty to protect the rights of the patient, that she can't just do that. She said he had no way to consent, that he was out of it. My feeling is, why was it so critical? The guy was out of it. It's not that he was going to jump up out of the bed and run off. That wasn't the point. I don't even know what the underlying cause was. I think it was an accident of some sort, or whatever it was. It doesn't matter. This guy so obviously lost it. He completely lost it. He was so frustrated and so angry. And there was no justification for it, really. And the poor woman, I just felt so bad for her. That she had to go through that.
Big incident that we've had, of course, with video. Video tells so much of the story. We see with this, we kind of see, like Carol said, when you watch the long version of the video, you kind of, at the end of it, like,
why? Why did he do this?
Also, I'll tell you this, too, also with video. Yesterday, we had the incident with Sheriff Garber's daughter.
Yes.
The only reason they knew where she last was, because of video on the back of his property.
And thank goodness for that, man.
Yeah.
Look, I've met Mark, and I can tell you he's a phenomenal person, and my heart went out to him when I heard that yesterday morning. A couple of things. So the reason the police wanted his blood is because alcohol was involved, and alcohol is still processed even when you're in a coma. So they were trying to get blood out of him in a timely manner to be able to prosecute him for a wreck involving alcohol. My understanding is the guy that they were going after was he wrecked into another police officer. Okay. The hospital, my understanding, the hospital has since changed its policy about nurses being able to interact with police officers. Period. Okay. But I think this really highlights something important that we as a society are going to have to address at some point. So we task police officers with a job that is almost impossible to do perfectly. And we judge them in ways that are very, very tough. These guys can lose their jobs. They can be held criminally liable. And this was somebody acting out of emotion. He was emotional about it, was going after the nurse, and he had access to the power to take advantage of it. And he is not a fair representation of all police. And a lot of people sit back and go, well, there was 2 other police officers there who watched him do it. And I think that just points to how impossible it is for us to expect them to do their job perfectly all the time. So, look, the guy made a huge mistake. He deserves to lose his job. The hospital's doing the right thing. Hats off to the nurse for protecting the rights of the patient. But my perspective is, at some point, we have to be realistic about what we can expect from police officers.
Carol,
I agree with that completely. I totally support the police, but at some point, some accountability has to come into it, and that you would think that the training would be such that it would help them to not be so emotional. We expect them to perform at a higher standard. And I think the other 2 police officers standing by, that was an indictment also. At some point, somebody should have said, okay, buddy, cool down. We're not going to solve this right now. An hour or 2, if a guy wakes up, and then we can draw the blood, the alcohol will still be in his blood.
All right, let's wrap it up quick, Stafford.
Yeah, so there's I'm not sure if it's Miami or what town in Florida it is that has the lowest rate of officer-involved shootings. But there's a reason that it's the lowest, and it's because they typically hire from the military. And the reality is we do not train these guys enough and battle test these guys enough for them to be able to control their emotions in high stress atmospheres like this. So, again,
he was creating the stress. I mean, she's a nurse in a hospital, an emergency room. It's not exactly what you would call high stress. It was simply that she was following hospital policy, and he lost it because he couldn't get his way.
We're going to have to wrap it up right there. Wingin' It Wednesday brought to you each and every week by Service Cadillac. We, again, thank our panelists, Warren Caudle, Carol Ross, and Stafford Barnett.
Thank you.
For joining us again this week. We'll see you all next week. I'm sure we'll have way more to talk about. Let's talk about veterans next week. I think it's a good topic.
I think it's an excellent
Agreed.
topic.
All right, stay with us on the
And by the way,
Morning News.
I'm sorry we didn't get to the FEMA topic.
We'll get to it.
It's trouble.
I know.
Trouble.
All right, stay with us. It's the Acadiana's Morning News.